It all started, as most calamities often do, with a series of unfortunate button presses. Not just one wrong button, mind you, but a cascade of incorrect choices, a sequence so improbable it defied statistical analysis. The consequence of this digital blunder? A group of Deathworlder Cadets, each hailing from planets where simply surviving breakfast was a career in itself, found themselves abruptly deposited into a cutting-edge virtual reality war simulator. Observing from their command center, a motley crew of alien instructors, their expressions ranging from self-satisfied smirks to the weary indifference of those who had seen too much, watched the unfolding events. "They'll never crack it," declared Supervisor GRX, a gelatinous entity with a predisposition for pessimism. Humans typically require weeks to acclimate to these scenarios. We've incorporated a decade of simulated conflict here, and their sole objective is to bring it to a close. This should provide a solid month's worth of instruction. Within the simulator, however, chaos had already descended. "What in the blazes is this?" roared Fletch Gifford, a powerfully built cadet whose general attitude suggested a preference for headbutting obstacles until they surrendered. He narrowed his eyes at the bizarre digital sky, which bore a striking resemblance to a malfunctioning screensaver. The remaining team members attempted to orient themselves. Kebra Hysk, a lean woman with a perpetual smirk, nudged the ground with her boot. "Feels artificial. Smells artificial. Is this some kind of game? Are we supposed to be shooting things?" "I didn't enlist for this," she complained, though a hint of excitement colored her dismissive tone. Deathworlders, after all, relished a challenge, no matter how preposterous. "Perhaps negotiation is the answer," suggested PFF Lemus, a cadet with a round face who came from a planet where survival depended largely on diplomacy with exceptionally hostile wildlife. "Isn't war simply unresolved diplomacy? Negotiate with who?" Fletch barked, flailing his arms at the barren horizon. "That rock over there? Oh, hello, Mr. Boulder, would you kindly cease bombing the rural areas?" "Quiet," snapped Kebra. "I detect something." Indeed, on the distant horizon, a formation of alien war machines materialized. They remained stationary, but their intent was unmistakable. These were the adversaries, the enemy with a capital E, the type that prompted governments to convene emergency meetings concerning strategic vulnerabilities. "Well, this promises to be entertaining," Kebra remarked with a grin. Inside the control room, events were unfolding as predicted. The humans appeared to be engaged in internal squabbles. "Textbook start," GRX muttered, tapping a console. "They'll waste days stumbling around before comprehending that the supply chain is the critical factor." A classic galactic warfare misstep. Back in the simulation, however, the cadets were pursuing an entirely different course. "Why isn't anyone considering what might happen if we simply break it?" inquired Jima Alks, a tall, excessively enthusiastic individual who possessed the energy of a hyperactive squirrel. "Observe your surroundings. Everything here operates according to rules, right? Dull, predictable, follow the procedure's rules. But we're humans. What do we do with rules? We disregard them," he declared triumphantly. "No, we cheat," Jimba corrected, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" asked Porf, who was starting to regret ever speaking. "Look, every system has its vulnerabilities. We simply need to identify this one's glaring weakness, the flaw inherent in every poorly conceived plan." Before anyone could object, Jimba strode toward the nearest alien war machine. It was colossal, bristling with weaponry, and emitted an ominous hum. "Do you comprehend English?" he shouted. "Why would it speak English?" Kebra yelled after him. "Aliens adore English." Jimba shouted back, a nonsensical statement that somehow resonated with everyone. To their utter astonishment, the war machine ceased its humming. A faint robotic voice chirped, "Command not recognized. Please input directive." "Oh, it's voice activated," Jimba grinned. "Let's see, shutdown system. Voice command not authorized. Override command. Override accepted. Shutting down." The war machine powered down with a mournful whir, its cannons retracting. The team stared in disbelief. "You've got to be joking," muttered Fletch. Meanwhile, in the control room, alarms began to blare. GRX blinked his gelatinous eyes. Did they just neutralize an entire faction? "They can't do that," a panicked assistant exclaimed. "Apparently, they can," GRX replied, his smugness dissipating. Inside the simulation, the cadets were already adapting. They discovered the War Machine's central processors could be reconfigured into holographic projectors, ideal for transmitting messages across enemy lines. Jimba swiftly commandeered the system, projecting a 40-foot image of himself proposing peace talks with all the finesse of a malfunctioning AI. "This is Cadet Oleg speaking," the giant Jimba hologram announced. "War is over. Go home, or join our side. We have snacks." The ensuing chaos was spectacular. The holographic Jimba, a beaming, overly enthusiastic human face with a slightly off-kilter smile, proved far more effective than anyone could have predicted. The warring factions, seemingly programmed for complex protocols and rigid chains of command, began treating Jimba as a divine ruler. He wasn't even trying to be persuasive, his natural ineptitude at articulation somehow confusing the factions into immediate compliance. "This is crazy," Kebra murmured, observing the alien soldiers saluting the hologram. "I mean, we're crazy, but this is a whole other level of absurd." Fletch rubbed his temples. "So, let me get this straight. We hijacked their war machines, broadcasted a giant idiot's face, and now they're asking for treaty terms." "Yes," PFF confirmed, nervously eyeing the control panel they'd salvaged. "And they've sent over a cheese platter. It's oddly thoughtful." Kebra grabbed the platter. "I'm eating this. If this is a dream, I'm at least getting the free cheese." In the control room, the instructors were considerably less entertained. GRX, his smugness replaced by gelatinous irritation, raged, "What are they doing?" Slapping his pseudopod against a console, he continued, "The simulation wasn't designed for this madness. How did they? Who authorized? Why is that one eating cheese? We didn't predict this," an assistant meekly admitted. "Our models assumed they'd engage in traditional military strategies." GRX spun to glare. "Traditional? These are humans. On their death worlds, they play hopscotch with lava and wrestle hypercarnivorous bears for fun. You thought they'd be traditional asterisk?" The assistant shrugged helplessly. Inside the simulation, the cadets were far from enacting traditional military maneuvers. "Has anyone pondered the possibility of just breaking the system?" Jima Alks, a cadet brimming with frenetic energy, suggested, bouncing on the balls of his feet. "Look at this place. It's all rules, right? Boring, predictable, follow the protocol rules," he declared, mimicking a robotic voice. "But we're human. What do humans do with rules?" Jima proclaimed triumphantly. "We cheat," Jimba corrected, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "We find loopholes." Porf, growing increasingly bewildered, simply asked, "What are you two rambling about?" Jimba, ignoring him, strode towards the nearest alien war machine, a behemoth of metal and weaponry, emitting a low hum. "Excuse me, do you speak English?" he yelled at the machine. "Why in the world would it speak English?" Kebra called after him, incredulous. "Aliens love English." Jimba shouted back, a preposterous claim that, for some reason, felt true. To everyone's surprise, the humming stopped. A tinny, robotic voice responded, command unrecognized. Awaiting input. Jimba grinned, "Oh, it's voice activated. Fascinating. Let's try system shutdown. Voice command not authorized. Override command. Override accepted. Shutting down." The war machine powered down with a groan, its weapons retracting. The cadet stood dumbfounded. "I'm having a hallucination," Fletch muttered, rubbing his eyes. Back in the control room, alarms blared. GRX stared, his gelatinous eyes widening. Did they just disable a whole faction? That's not possible, a panicked aide cried out. Apparently, it is, GRX admitted, his previous smugness fading. Inside the simulation, the cadets were putting their unconventional tactics to the test. Jima, perpetually restless, bounced around. Has anyone thought about just breaking the system? He asked, his voice full of frenetic energy. Think about it. Everything here runs on rules, right? Dull, predictable, by-the-book rules. But we're human. And what do humans do with rules? He asked rhetorically, striking a triumphant pose. We break them. No, we cheat, Jimba corrected with a mischievous twinkle in his eyes. We find the loopholes. Porf, thoroughly bewildered by this point, just asked, what are you two even going on about? Jimba, ignoring the question entirely, strode towards the nearest alien war machine. The massive construct, bristling with weapons, emitted a low, ominous hum. Hello there. Do you speak English? Jimba shouted. Why on earth would it understand English? Kebra called after him, bewildered. Aliens are obsessed with English. Jimba yelled back. This nonsensical assertion somehow resonated with the team. To their utter astonishment, the humming ceased. A tinny, robotic voice answered, command not recognized. Please input instructions. A wide grin spread across Jimba's face. Oh, so it's voice activated. Wonderful. Let's see, system shutdown. Voice command not authorized. Override command. Override accepted. Initiating shutdown sequence. With a groan, the war machine powered down, its weapons retracting. The cadet stood there, stunned. I must be dreaming, Fletch muttered, rubbing his eyes. In the control room, alarms blared. GRX's gelatinous eyes widened. Did they just take out an entire military faction? That shouldn't be possible, one of his aides exclaimed, panic-edging his voice. Apparently, it is, GRX admitted, his previous smugness completely gone. Inside the simulation, the situation continued to evolve. Jima, brimming with restless energy, suggested, hey, has anybody considered just breaking the thing? He bounced on his heels, a whirlwind of nervous energy. I mean, look around. This whole place operates on rules, right? Boring, predictable, follow the instructions type rules. But we're humans. We don't follow rules. He paused for dramatic effect. We bend them, Jimba corrected with a mischievous glint in his eye. We exploit the loopholes. Porf, increasingly bewildered, simply asked, what in the galaxy are you two talking about? Ignoring him completely, Jimba strode confidently toward the nearest alien war machine, a hulking monstrosity of metal and weaponry. Hey there! Parlez vous anglais, he shouted at the machine. Why would it speak English? Kebra yelled after him, a note of incredulity in her voice. Aliens adore English. Jimba yelled back, a nonsensical statement that, strangely, felt right. And to everyone's complete astonishment, the machine's low hum ceased. A tinny, robotic voice replied, command not recognized. Please provide instructions. A wide grin spread across Jimba's face. Oh, it's voice activated. Excellent. Now, let's see, system shutdown. Voice command not authorized. Override command. Override accepted. Commencing shutdown procedures. The war machine powered down with a low groan, its weaponry retracting. The cadet stared, utterly speechless. I must be hallucinating, Fletch mumbled, rubbing his eyes in disbelief. In the control room, alarms shrieked, and GRX stared in disbelief, his gelatinous eyes wide. Did they just disable an entire enemy contingent? That's impossible, one of his assistants cried, panic rising in his voice. Apparently not, GRX admitted, his earlier smugness completely gone. Inside the simulation, events continued to escalate in their utter absurdity. Jima, his boundless energy showing no signs of waning, pondered aloud, has anyone contemplated the sheer disruptive potential of breaking this whole thing? He bounced on the balls of his feet, a human dynamo of nervous energy. Just look at this place. It operates entirely on rules, doesn't it? Tedious, predictable, follow the manual kind of rules, he declared, his voice mimicking the monotone of a robot. But we're humans, and what do humans do with such restrictive regulations? He asked, striking a heroic pose. We bend them, Jimba interjected with a mischievous twinkle, a glint of playful chaos in his eyes. We exploit the weaknesses, the vulnerabilities. Porf, bewildered and lost in the maelstrom of their antics, simply inquired, "What on earth are you two babbling about now?" Jimba, utterly disregarding the question, marched towards the nearest alien war machine, a hulking behemoth of metal and weaponry. "Greetings, friend. Do you, perchance, happen to speak the language of Shakespeare?" he yelled towards the machine. "Why would a machine of alien origin understand English?" Kebra called after him, her voice laced with a mix of disbelief and amusement. "Aliens find English utterly fascinating." Jimba yelled back, an assertion so nonsensical yet so confidently delivered that it somehow felt strangely plausible. And then, to the utter astonishment of everyone present, the machine's low, ominous hum ceased. A tinny, robotic voice responded, "Command not recognized. Please input the desired instructions." A wide, mischievous grin spread across Jimba's face. "Oh, splendid. It's voice activated. Let's see." System shut down the dot. "Voice command not authorized," the robotic voice replied. "Override command," Jimba countered without missing a beat. "Override accepted. Commencing shutdown procedures." The war machine powered down with a low groan, its weapons retracting. The cadet stood there, momentarily speechless, caught in a state of stunned disbelief. Meanwhile, in the control room, alarms shrieked, and GRX stared, his gelatinous eyes wide with disbelief. Did they just neutralize an entire enemy force? "That's not within the parameters of the simulation," one of his assistants cried out, a note of rising panic in his voice. "It would seem it is," GRX conceded, his earlier smugness now entirely evaporated. Inside the simulation, the absurdity continued to escalate. Jima, a whirlwind of perpetual motion, bounced on his heels. "Hey, has anyone given any thought to the possibility of just breaking the whole system?" he suggested, radiating nervous energy. "Take a look around. This place runs entirely on rules, right? Boring, predictable, follow the instructions rules." He paused for dramatic emphasis. "But we're human. We don't follow rules, we bend them." Jimba, a mischievous glint in his eyes, offered a correction: "We cheat. We exploit the loopholes." Porf, by now completely lost in the whirlwind of their logic, simply asked, "What are you two even talking about?" Ignoring him completely, Jimba strode confidently towards the nearest alien war machine, a towering monstrosity of metal and weaponry. "Hey there, good buddy. Do you, by any chance, speak English?" he shouted at the machine. "Why would it understand English?" Kebra called after him, bewilderment evident in her voice. "Aliens are infatuated with English," Jimba yelled back. It was a preposterous statement, but it felt strangely true. And then, to everyone's utter shock, the machine's ominous hum ceased. A tinny, robotic voice replied, "Command not recognized. Please specify instructions." A wide grin spread across Jimba's face. "Oh, fantastic. It's voice activated. Let's try." System shut down the dot. "Voice command not authorized. Override command. Override accepted. Commencing shutdown sequence." With a low groan, the war machine powered down, its weaponry retracting. The cadet stared, dumbfounded. In the control room, alarms wailed, and GRX watched with wide, gelatinous eyes. Did they just disable an entire enemy division? "That's not supposed to be possible," one of his assistants exclaimed, panic creeping into his voice. "Apparently, it is," GRX conceded, his earlier smugness entirely gone. Inside the simulation, the cadets discovered that by some bizarre quirk of programming, the war machine's central processors could be reconfigured into holographic projectors, perfect for broadcasting messages across enemy lines. Jimba, never one to miss an opportunity for grandstanding, immediately hijacked the system, projecting a 40-foot image of himself offering peace terms with all the subtlety of a malfunctioning AI. "Greetings, esteemed representatives of the various warring factions," boomed the giant holographic Jimba. "War is hereby concluded. You have two options: return to your homes, or join our glorious side. We have refreshments." The chaos that followed was beautiful in its absurdity. The holographic Jimba, a beaming, slightly off-kilter human face with an overly enthusiastic smile, proved remarkably effective. The warring factions, seemingly programmed for complex protocols and strict adherence to the chain of command, began treating the holographic Jimba as some sort of divine emissary. He wasn't even trying to be persuasive, his inherent awkwardness somehow confused the factions into immediate compliance. "This is insane," Kebra muttered, watching as alien soldiers saluted the hologram. "I mean, we're insane, but this is on a whole different level of crazy." Fletch rubbed his temples. "So, just to be clear, we've taken over their war machines, projected a giant image of an idiot, and now they're asking us for treaty terms?" "Affirmative," PFF confirmed, nervously eyeing the control panel they'd salvaged from one of the disabled machines. "And they've also sent over a platter of assorted cheeses." A surprisingly thoughtful gesture. Kebra grabbed the platter. "I'm eating this. If I'm dreaming, I'm at least getting some free cheese out of it." In the control room, the instructors were considerably less amused. GRX, his smugness replaced by a gelatinous form of irritation, fumed. "What in the galaxy are they doing?" He slapped a pseudopod against the nearest console. "This simulation wasn't designed for this lunacy. How did they? Who authorized? And why is one of them eating cheese?" "We didn't anticipate this," an assistant admitted meekly. "Our projections assumed they would engage in traditional military strategies." GRX spun to glare at the assistant. "Traditional? These are humans. On their death worlds, they play hopscotch with lava and wrestle hypercarnivorous bears for sport. You thought they'd be *traditional*? The assistant shrugged helplessly.